My grandfather, Gerard Charles Smetana, was born in June of 1932, his birth name being Gerhard Karl Smetana. But the story really started in Vienna on a spring night in 1938. At the time, my grandfather was 6 years old. His parents had been married for 7 years. Gerard was in bed when he heard the chanting all night long, en Reich, en Volk, en Fussen. This translates to one country, one people, one leader. It was the Nazis chanting, only hours after they had invaded Austria.
I think the most shocking thing really was the night that Adolf Hitler, moved in. I mean, not even personally, but because my bedroom, I was, 5.5 or 5, and my bedroom was facing the cathedral, which was only 2 blocks away, and you could really hear what was going on. And he had organized. I mean, I understood what was going on, and you could hear the chanting of Ein Reich, R-E-I-C-H, Ein Volk. That's E-I-N and V-O-L-K, and one country, one folk, one people, and Ein Führer, and one Führer is the leader, and that was a scary thing. And from that point on, life really changed in Vienna completely for me.
After Austria had been captured, the old chancellor, Kurt Schuschnigg, had been forced to step down. The new ruler had been declared. Arthur Seyss, the German, had been declared by Hitler. Gerard and his family, Dorrit, his sister, Frederick Charles, his father, and Marian Smetana, his mother, who was born in Czechoslovakia. They lived in a big apartment in the center of Vienna because Frederick was a wealthy lawyer. They had a driver, a caretaker for Gerard and Dorrit, a personal shaver for Frederick, a cook, and a very fancy car. Those were the good days, my grandfather said. Frederick's brother, Richard, was a lawyer. The Germans did not like one of his cases and threw him in Buchenwald concentration camp. The night of Germany taking Vienna was the same night that Frederick's fancy car got stolen by the Germans. Even though the Jews were not able to go to parks, the caretaker still took the 2 Smetana siblings. Frederick tried to get immigration papers, but the U.S. quota was already filled. Then they were forced to give away their apartment to the Germans, so they moved to a smaller apartment. Instead, he sent Gerard and Dorrit to Brno, Czechoslovakia, to their grandparents. The Smetana siblings arrived in May 1938. Their house was several stories high and had a very nice garden. Gerard's grandfather was a hat and boot maker, and the store was located in downtown Brno. He assumed there would be no issues with the Germans in Czechoslovakia, but well known to us now, he was very wrong. Gerard's 2 aunts were named Erika and Gertie, who lived with them in Brno. Later, Gertie's entire family, as in herself and her 2 children, were gassed at Theresienstadt concentration camp. Erika helped look after Gerard and Dorrit while they were in Brno. Meanwhile, back in Vienna, where Frederick and Marianne were still living, all the synagogues were destroyed. This is now known as the Kristallnacht. After the Kristallnacht, which was in October 1938, his parents knew that they had to leave Austria.
I called on the telephone, which was unusual. Those days people didn't just use the phone. And so it's a big deal to get a telephone call from out of the country. And we were in Czechoslovakia, he was still in Vienna. And he said he was coming to pick us up and we were leaving the next day. There wasn't any question. And he told my big grandparents where I stayed they should come too, and they refused.
So he decided that they would move to Greece by train. The train company was called the Orient Express. At that train station, there were 2 different trains, one to Greece and one to Istanbul. Marian and the 2 children boarded the train to Greece, and Frederick was racing around trying to find the right train. He didn't. He found the train going to Istanbul. When the trains departed, Frederick, with the passports and the money, was going in the opposite direction of Marianne, Dorrit, Gerard, and the 15 suitcases of luggage. 5 miles into the ride, Frederick realized that he wasn't on the right track, so he pulled the emergency brake and ran all the way back to the train station by foot. He sent a message by telegraph to the station where the rest of the family was, and they received it. They were at a small train station in Serbia. They stayed in an inn, and walking through the town, they looked very different. Frederick met them the next day. Finally, they once again boarded the train to Greece, all together. They arrived in Salonika, Greece, for 2 weeks, while Frederick tried to get them into America. Once again, they had no luck, so they moved to Athens, where they stayed with a Jewish family. They were there for 2 to 3 months. Gerard was a picky eater, so his parents took him to a hotel to eat. Finally, after a lot of trying, the American consul of Greece let them gain a capitalist visa, which allowed them to travel to America. By boat, they traveled to America. The ship was called the Hamburg. The family traveled first class. Richard managed to escape the concentration camp and met up with his family. They arrived in New York on March 4th, 1939. They bought a small apartment on West 94th Street, where they lived for several months until they moved to 3 West 87th Street. Frederick worked as a sales manager and went to Brooklyn Law School and St. John's Law School. Frederick was stricken with a blood clot, and at the same time, he and Marianne split after 16 years of marriage. Marianne and Dorrit stayed in their apartment, and Frederick and Gerard moved in with Richard. Frederick died on April 7, 1947. 60 years later, Gerard, or to me, Papa, took us all back to Vienna and showed us where he grew up. I was really young, but now I see what an opportunity it was to have a chance to see where his story began. What I think is amazing about my Papa is that even after he lost everything and had to build everything from scratch in America, that he has remained an eternal optimist, and I hope I have inherited that from him.